You are saying that Harvey Barnes is the new Riyad Mahrez?
I'd say he was better than him already, obviously. I've been saying that for years. No one listens to me. Welcome to episode 8 of the First4LCFC Podcast. With me, Jamie Thorpe. I am back, and it's just Chris Mosen joining me today, as we sadly forgot that the UK is the only country who have to help out the farmers and milkmen. So we forgot about daylight saving time, and Austin was waiting for an hour. But he will hopefully be back next week. And instead, we're going to have a bit of a rapid review of the past week, and we've got a lot to get stuck into. So we may as well get going, Chris. Just you and me this week. So an injury-ravaged Leicester kicked off our Europa League campaign at home to Ukrainian side Zorya Luhansk with a massive 3-0 win and set us on our way. Look, how important was it that we started with a win, especially against the so-called weaker side in our group?
I mean, first of all, I've got to say a big kudos to Austin, who patiently waited for 45 minutes before actually messaging to ask where me and Jamie were. He's possibly the most patient lad I've ever met. But yeah, like you say, we didn't realise that clocks. Well, I didn't realise that clocks don't change at the same time around the world. So that's my bad. But yeah, in answer to your question, which seems like a really long time ago now, last Thursday, but I think we went into the game with it just felt like we should be turning this team over, and I think it's fair to say we were kept on our toes for the first 15 or 20 minutes. Really, I think they should have probably gone 1-0 up, shouldn't they? With that cross, good save from Schmeichel. So, but yeah, nonetheless, it's a clean sheet. It was minutes under the belt for some players, and it was a convincing victory in the end, wasn't it? I mean, my main gripe is that imagine that as a full stadium. Even though it's the Europa League, no doubt would have sold that out. They'd have brought some fans over, I'd imagine, and it just would have felt different. It just feels so flat, doesn't it? So I'm looking ahead to Athens, thinking that maybe if we're on it's an away day, it might feel a bit more sort of European. But it just felt, I don't know, like a friendly almost. I still watched the full match, but yeah, I mean, it was fairly comfortable, wasn't it? I don't see them causing any more trouble really away from home, especially now that we know what they're about. But for me, big praise for them for coming and actually playing as well. Because I think when me and Austin previewed this last week, I said I'd expect them to set up with like 2 banks of 4. I mean, 4 banks of 4 might be better in their case, but I think. Yeah, they played an expansive game of football and it caused trouble. So, fair play for that, because no one wants to see a negative game of football.
No, that's it. Credit to them, because like you said, they did try and play a bit, and they created a couple of chances in the first 20 minutes. But after that, we just had too much for them, didn't we? But, I mean, do you think that it shows that we've got a much greater sort of strength of depth in the squad at the minute? Because our injury problems have been well publicised, and you had the likes of Maddison whilst he played. He's coming back from his injury, and really we probably use that to get some minutes in his legs more than anything. But I mean, with the players that come in, they obviously did a good job and navigated what could have been a tricky test. Do you think that bodes well for when we hopefully get to the latter stages of the competition with hopefully what will be a full squad? Do you think it shows that we've hopefully got what we need to compete?
It's a tough one. We always allude to squad depth, don't we? And for me personally, it's something I'm still not completely happy with. I don't think there is like a perfect balance in our squad. And I think it's hard to say that based against playing against the standard of opposition we played against, because like we're all assuming that Braga is probably the biggest test in this group, or not even that. Maybe if they went 1-0 up in this game, it would be a test of our character. Right? It's nice to see, we do have like second choice players in certain positions, but I think fundamentally for me, the fact we ended up winning was, 1, because we're a better quality team. 2, our fitness levels just seemed a bit better really in terms of the longevity of the game. So it's tricky because right now we are in somewhat of an injury pandemic, aren't we? So I guess we've got to count our blessings in regards to actually coming away unscathed and keeping a clean sheet. But for me, I don't think it's a fair test to say whether or not this proves that we have a sound enough squad depth.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. The real tests are in the games that are coming up for sure. But I mean, there's a few players obviously came in and had a big impact, and crucially would have got a fair bit of confidence. So I think the likes of Barnes and Iheanacho in particular have been picked out as performing. Obviously, I was very, very happy to see our Lord and Saviour Harvey Barnes doing bits on the European stage. But so what did you make of those two players in particular? Do you think that they warranted the praise they were given, or was it simply a case of, the standard they were playing against?
No, yeah, I think you've got to give credit. You can only beat who's in front of you. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, nah, against better opposition they wouldn't have performed, because ultimately we've got drawn against these teams. They've turned up. Some players might find it hard to motivate themselves for lesser fixtures, if you like. So the fact they both put in an absolute quality shift it can only be a good thing for me. Iheanacho, 2 assists. And a much deserved goal on top of that is as close to a perfect performance as you like from him. And I think it just goes to show that there must be a good spirit in the squad, because I'm looking at their comments on each other's Instagrams after yesterday's victory against Arsenal. It just seems that there is good camaraderie, there's good spirit. So, and I'm sure all the players are happy for Kelechi in particular. For kicking on in the opportunities that he does get. And Harvey Barnes, he seems like a different player this season as well, generally speaking. I was speaking to Austin off air about this, and for me, I think certain players are definitely thriving under the lack of fans inside stadiums. And I think he may be one of them. I think last season we alluded to the fact that he may be a confidence player. This season, now that he hasn't got the sort of the groaning or the easily excitable crowd on his back, he might feel like he's playing with a bit more freedom. It's hard to say.
What a point which came up after the game, which I thought was really interesting, was that because Fuchs obviously played and he didn't really get beyond the halfway line, did he? He stayed primarily defensive. He was very, very solid at the back. But do you think that had a positive impact on Barnes? Because previously, last season, Barnes was playing with Chilwell, and Chilwell likes to get forward a bit more, so Barnes is having to worry about defensive duties as well. Do you think having that weight taken off his mind has allowed him to sort of free himself up and purely focus on what he's really good at, which is running at players?
It's an interesting point. I've not thought about that myself, but now you've mentioned it, I think. Well, yeah. Ultimately, if you go and tell a player in his pre-match instructions or as the game unfolds, look, you only have to focus on going forwards, and just like in any profession, if you only have to focus on something that you prefer doing, you're naturally going to probably perform better at it. And it's not even that. I find that sometimes when we do have these overlapping wingers, it's almost like we saturate a certain area of the pitch and it doesn't open the game as much. I mean, in order to sort of explain this more, I just find that we're almost one-dimensional in the fact that we are looking for that overlap. But whereas if you give Barnes a bit more freedom, I'm not comparing him to Jack Grealish at all, but it gives him that freedom to sort of drift in between the lines. Whereas maybe if you do have an attacking fullback, for me, I just feel like it's always the easier option to maybe offload the ball out wide, which is a frustration of mine. But I feel he played a freedom against Zorya in the Europa League, and yeah, you really can't complain of his performance.
No, and he was rewarded with what was a brilliantly taken goal. I think it's fair to say that I wasn't 100% sure he was going to stick it away, even in that situation, because his finishing has been the thing that let him down. But he showed really good composure, and actually the sort of the pairing that I likened it to during the game was obviously not to the same levels that they reached, but Simpson and Mahrez, in that Danny Simpson just sat on the halfway line when we had the ball, if not for deeper, and just gave Mahrez that freedom to go and do Mahrez sort of thing. So
just on record, you are saying that Harvey Barnes is the new Riyad Mahrez?
I'd say he was better than him already. Obviously, I've been saying that for years. No one listens to me. No, but it's the effect that the players have on each other is more my point. I think Barnes has shown that he's got an unbelievable amount of potential, and I think his versatility is something that could be important as well. In that we saw him play almost as a second striker as well, didn't we? So I mean, I think that was only because we had a lack of personnel to do that. But I think, him playing off someone like Iheanacho who drops in deep and frees up that space could be very dangerous going forward. I don't know. I'm not the manager, obviously. But look, we did see Barnes play up front for the first 60 odd minutes yesterday in the win against Arsenal. So that seems like a good time to take it over. I mean, how do you assess that game then, Chris? I know it's such a cliche, but I mean, the first half didn't exactly match the second half, did it? Was it a tactical masterstroke by Rodgers, or do you put this down to Arsenal's lack of cohesiveness going forward?
Yeah, well, it definitely was a game of two halves, and it's a cliche you want to avoid, but there's no avoiding it in this instance. I mean, you could say they were hard done by a disallowed goal. You know, it's an area it's a grey area in terms of, you know, is Xhaka interfering, etc. But we won't get dulled down with that. I mean, we were lucky because I feel if they score, then it does change the game. But you know, fortunately, it didn't. For me, in particular, Barnes, he was vacant in the first half. I'm not saying that's his fault at all. I just don't think. I don't think we played to his strengths. I think he's playing as a centre forward, a position that he's not that familiar with, really, especially not recently speaking. But I think, in all honesty, if Vardy's fully fit, he's starting. So I think there is an element of luck, really, because Vardy has come on probably because he's only got 45 minutes or even less in his legs. But as I tweeted at half time, that's going to give us that outlet, and we just turn them over. We get in behind them, and it was fantastic to see. But ultimately, it was great game management because Brendan Rodgers used what he had to his strengths. Because he could have probably started Vardy and took him off at, potentially got 60 minutes out of him. But ultimately, a note that I made was that could this have been an insight into the future of how Jamie Vardy is used? Because ultimately he's not getting any younger. Sure, he's not showing any signs of letting up either, but ultimately he will get to a stage in his career where he hasn't got 90 minutes in him, potentially twice a week. So, but why not? We could keep bringing him on for half an hour, 25 minutes until he's in his late 30s, and it's evident how he changes the game. It's fantastic how Rodgers has adapted his style to Vardy, and quite rightly we should sort of build a team around him because he is a talisman. He's got a fantastic record. His record against the top six is fantastic. His record against Arsenal it's in the top 5 now, isn't it? So for me, we were patient. Unlike how we played in previous weeks, we knew that we weren't going to get the maximum amount of possession, but we were disciplined, we were gritty. Just the work they do off the ball, the leadership in keeping a structure, moving side to side, tracking your men. It's the stuff that goes unnoticed. And I want to give a shout out to Zorya Tielemans as well, because whilst Under was fantastic, his pace is electric. That ball was, sumptuous and a great finish from Vardy. But that ball, that incisive ball from Tielemans, that's incredible. The way he split the defence open, set Under free. So for me, we waited so patiently, brought Vardy on and stretched the game, and that's all we could have done.
I think you're right, especially to shine a light on Zorya Tielemans, because he was not wrongly criticised last year. But this season, I think in the 2 big wins that we've had, so the game at the Etihad and the game last night, his pass and his sort of the incisiveness of his play has directly led to 3 goals. I think if you remember, he had the ball into Maddison against Man City where we won the penalty. He had the ball through to Castagna before he crossed it for Vardy to flick it in. And then obviously he had that magical ball over the top yesterday. I mean, the defending obviously left a lot to be desired in that for the goal yesterday. But Under's pace was fantastic. But how important do you think it is that someone like Tielemans gets ticking again, gets that confidence, and the way that it's quite exciting to think that the way that he's going to link up when all the players are back and firing?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because it's easy to get carried away off the back of a fantastic week, really, for the club. But then we wonder, why have we struggled for this sort of consistency? Well, ever since we won the title, really. we've never, since winning the title, we haven't really struggled against these top sides. If anything, our record's really good against them. But why do we then sort of drop off when it comes against, so supposed, weaker sides? So obviously, part of the discussion is down to not having a fully fit squad. Players like Tielemans who do go missing in games. So I don't know. It's obviously something we're not privy to. Like, we don't know what goes on inside these players' heads. I mean, I was listening to the discussion after the match on Radio Leicester yesterday, where they were saying, "Was Tielemans even like fully match fit yesterday?" But it is these moments of class which do separate him. It's for me, it's just purely frustrating that we can't string a run of results together, because I feel like if we were just 1-0 here, 2 on there, keeping it tight, but grabbing these goals on the break like we did in our title-winning season, you string a few wins together, and that's when the confidence and the belief, grows. Because this season it's wide open, isn't it? You highlight where the traditional top 6 are in the Prem, albeit it's only after 6 games, and they're all over the place. That no one can string any consistency together. So if a team does manage to get 3, 4, 5 wins on the bounce, the belief will grow, and that can come from anywhere. So for me, consistency would make us a threat, including players like Tielemans.
I mean, you're absolutely right. This season is absolutely bonkers, isn't it? I think as the table stands at the moment, only one of the traditional top 6 is in the top 8. Obviously, Liverpool in second, and you've got Chelsea at 9th, Arsenal 10th, Spurs 11th, Man City 13th, Man United gloriously sitting in 15th, which I'm not going to take too much joy in. But you're right, that consistency is something that the club that manages to get that is the clubs that will do well. I mean, you look at our last 4 results or in the league, we've lost at home to West Ham and Villa, yet we've beaten Man City and Arsenal away. I mean, I can't quite make heads or tails of that, but I think there's got to be some credit given to Rodgers for, I criticised him a lot last year for not being flexible and sticking to his guns, but I think he's shown in the games against Arsenal, Man City, that he's got a different way of playing. His game plan was very negative in the first half. I think there's no shame in that, but he shut their players down big time.
I agree. I agree 100%. But that's the thing. Albeit yesterday against Arsenal, purely because they're a bogey team away from home, I generally wasn't confident. I never predicted a loss, and I predicted a 2-0 loss before the game, and I'm so
just quickly while we're on it, did anyone get the predictions right yesterday? just wondering.
It's worth noting that Jamie did say 1-0 pre-match, so fair play.
Sorry, it's literally the first time I've ever got it right. Please carry on.
But maybe I'll predict more losses. But no, in terms of generally speaking, against top 6, I just feel not more confident, but it's unsettling that you're saying that Rodgers has a plan B, but I still disagree. Does he have a plan B against teams that are happy to sit back and teams that are happy to give us the majority of possession? Because statistically speaking, they just this season alone, they're the games we've dropped points in. So is it fair to say that we're not creative enough when we have the ball? Because a lot of our goals against these bigger teams are coming on the break. So yeah, is that a fair measure of what a true quality side is, that we can't break teams down?
No, I think that's a very, very good point. He needs to have probably 3 game plans rather than just being able to play on the counter and sort of being a bit more offensive. You're right. We struggle when teams are organised and they pack the defence, and that's something. I mean, is it a personnel issue? Is it not? Because obviously Maddison is the main man there, but does that mean that there's got to be more emphasis placed on the likes of Tielemans and Pratt and Barnes to sort of create something in those sort of games, or what?
The answer for me is I just feel like we need to give a player freedom in that final third, because it's all well and good playing the incisive passes and stuff, but if you're playing against a team that is happy to sit back, you are really going to struggle for that space. So I find like I often find it frustrating that Maddison is almost like a deep line playmaker, when in reality that should be sort of Tielemans. Like, you give Maddison that, again, I'm going to relate to Jack Grealish, give him a bit more freedom, or even Barnes, whose dribbling has been fantastic this season. Just go and say, look, go and play in between the lines and create something, because I found if we start rigid, and almost cautious, if you like, in playing the ball left, right, and then looking for these incisive passes. We've gone through games this season where we've not had a shot on target, I think. So for me, I just think give someone that freedom and take the game to the opposition. And then you go on, look, this is what I mean, like Arsenal in the 90s and going into Millennium, it was always 1-0 to the Arsenal. Just play. We don't have to play this expansive, free-flowing football like the Man Cities and Liverpools. It's clearly not working for them as well this season. We get an early lead and then play this sort of wafty game, because then the opposition have to come out and play. So it's totally different. For me, the frustration is we let games go for too long, then we get caught, and then we don't have a plan B. Obviously everyone would sooner go 1-0 up and then sort of settle into a game.
No, you're right. We've sort of rediscovered that problem that we had a few years back, where we would concede early and then just spend 70, 80 minutes trying to break a team down who had no intention of trying to play, and we didn't really have the answer to do that. But I mean, let's hope that the sort of play, because I think Pratt has shown that he can have an impact on the game. Tielemans, like we mentioned, is sort of excelling in that role. So, I mean, let's wait and see. But I mean, one player that we wanted to talk about was Mendy, who, I mean, for my money, he was excellent yesterday, and I think he has been brilliant in a few of the games. He's obviously struggled in a couple of them, as has been the majority of the team. But it raises an interesting question. So, if Leicester play a midfield three, as they did for a majority of last season, and we've started this year, when indeed he comes back, who drops out for your money?
It's such a tough question, isn't it? Because surely, well, first of all, and this is a rhetorical question, it's not suggestive, it's more playing devil's advocate. Does Ndidi just walk back into the team, or does he earn his place back? That's the first question I want to ask. I'm sure people, including Ed, are yelling at their phones right now because he thinks he wins it on merit. But for me, surely if we do get that consistency to the point of when Ndidi returns, are we not rocking the boat by just inviting him back into the team? For me, he's a totally different player to someone like Mendy. Maybe not totally different, but he's a clear ball-winning midfielder. In terms of his statistics, they're incredible. He wins tackles that he has no right to win. But for me, like I say, if there's a balance in that midfield, I think he has to re-earn his place in there. It's a tough one to say who's dropping out, because the obvious choice would be just drop Mendy and bring Ndidi back, surely.
I mean, that would be what I'd imagine most people are assuming. But I think you're right in that the midfield, for me, looks nicely balanced with Mendy there. In that I think he's added to his game in that he does look forward more often than not. He's not going to be a player that looks for the forward pass every single time. And I doubt that's what he's being asked to do, in all fairness, as well. But he wins the ball back very, very well. He's very tidy. But indeed, on his day, is arguably one of the best in the world in his position. So can you afford to leave a man like that out the side? Would be.
I think ultimately it's a self-answering question. They're both going to get game time purely because of the number of fixtures. When's Ndidi due back?
Well, a fair few, probably 3 or 4 more weeks, I think was the worst case scenario.
Well, there you go. So it's going to coincide with maybe, you might get you might still get a group game in the Europa League. Maybe, I'm not sure what the diary looks like by then, but ultimately that's going to coincide with a busy Christmas period, and then you've got another tournament, say in the FA Cup. So I don't doubt that these players are all going to get game time, and it might be the case that one type of player is better suited to playing against these big six sides, and the other fits in against the teams that are harder to break down. So for me, they're probably, by the end of the season, I think there'll be a fair balance of minutes played, to be fair. And I don't think we'll look back and say, look, he was first choice, he was second. I think it's going to get you're going to have to use your squad wisely this year if we're going to go deep into the Europa League.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on with that. It's actually a huge positive that we have 2 players who can play in that role and do so competently. I think it's fair to say that if Ndidi is injured again, or like he is now, it's no longer the absolute disaster that it would have been at the same time last year, which I think is credit to Mendy and the way that he sort of reignited his Leicester career. But I mean, there is another selection headache as well that I wanted to talk to you about. Quite a few Leicester fans or football fans in general probably raised a few eyebrows when we paid what was perceived to be a big value for Wesley Fofana. Obviously, he's played 3 games for Leicester now. He was absolutely outstanding for my money again yesterday. Say if Leicester want to play a back 4, and their ideal side is likely Pereira on the right, Castagna on the left. Who is the centre-back pairing when everyone is fit for you that is Leicester's strongest now?
It's, first of all, Fofana, incredible signing, and it's absolutely jaw-dropping that it was only us and West Ham, and that was only ever going to be one team winning that purely from a financial point of view. But incredible recruitment. This lad looks like he's 29, not 19. His confidence. I was watching the game with my dad yesterday. Like, his confidence is audacious, and that comes with that age, I guess. He's come into a new league off the back of only 14 appearances in the top flight in France, and he just looks like he's made for it. Inevitably, he's going to be linked away in January. Inevitably, he's probably going to put pen to paper on a bumper deal straight away. Similar, I can see him progressing similar to someone like Dele Alli, who signed like 4 or 5 contracts within like 2 years or something at Spurs when he first broke through, because this lad is a serious talent. But in answer to your question, again, I think it's going to be similar to the midfield thing. And it goes to show that our squad depth is growing in the way that we're going to have to rotate. But simply put, I would like to see probably him and Sionchu sitting in at the back. Evans, he's solid, but there's been a couple of occasions where if he is like in a 50-50 challenge, he's getting beaten a lot of the time. And I think a couple of times this season, he's given away a yellow card. He's had to take the man down. Having 2 more versatile, more athletic centre-backs, whilst, Sionchu and Fofana inevitably will have flaws to the game, I'd like to see that as a sort of a long-term partnership, if you like. I'm not going to compare them to, Ferdinand and Vidic or anything, but if you want to have an iconic duo that's there for 5, 6, 7 years, that's the pairing you're looking at, surely.
Yeah, I think you're right. My personal view is I think that it won't necessarily be a problem anyway, because a back 5 is likely what I'd imagine Rodgers is working towards, and the centre backs of Fofana, Evans, and Sionchu is going to be a brilliant combo. I mean, so Fofana's shown that his interceptions are brilliant. He's got the pace to get back. He's brave, and also I don't know if you
aerial ability, attacking wise.
Yeah, absolutely. He gets up, doesn't he? But he was probably unlucky not to score. But I think that it was quite telling that quite a few of the Arsenal players were targeting him a little bit. I think trying to wind him up, trying to get under his skin, and he didn't rise to it. He didn't bite in the way that we've seen Sionchu do disastrously a few times. And so I think that combination could be very, very good. And hopefully Sionchu isn't out for quite as long as he is supposed to be, and that headache can be brought around.
I think it's quite well. Yeah, obviously, first of all, we hope Sionchu comes back, definitely. But on a lighter note, I think because Arsenal signed, is it Saliba from Saint Etienne, didn't they? I think it's fair to say that we got the better of the 2 players there.
Yeah, I think they may have got them mixed up, and they signed the wrong one. I just, like you said, I cannot believe that it was only 2 clubs looking at him based on. I know it's only 3 performances, but early signs are that's going to go on to be a hell of a signing. Leicester recruitment team have struck gold again. So let's look ahead and put our necks on the line. I'm going to see if I can do 2 in a row. Predictions wise, Leicester's next game Thursday, like you said, away trip, AEK Athens coming up. They're doing well in their domestic league. They've only lost 1 of their first 5, but they did get fairly comprehensively beaten by Braga in the week 3-0. So how do you see this one going for Leicester then, Chris? The game after is on a Monday against Leeds, so Leicester will have a little bit more of a break. Do you think that we'll go full strength side, or do you think there'll be a bit of rotation again?
This fixture would have been a totally different game with fans in it. It's a boring conversation. I'll keep banging the same drum, but some of the atmosphere you get out there in Greece would be incredible and ultimately very intimidating. So I think, home advantage sort of almost goes out the window. But nonetheless, again, in answer to your question, it's a step up from Zorya at home. I don't know a lot about AEK Athens. Historically, they're a famous team, aren't they? I'm not sure I question the validity of the Greek football system anyway. I'm not sure how much match fixing still goes on there, but some very strange results from time to time when I do delve into that. But nonetheless, squad rotation, I think we've got to be sensible and think, this is a bit of a more tricky game than Zorya at home. And how long will players need to sort of recover? Obviously, they'll probably, fly back, well, maybe even on the same night, so probably no training the day after. So for me, there's definitely going to be changes from what we saw at Arsenal. But I expect to see, obviously a strong side, and ultimately, I'd like to think we can win now. I think it's going to be a tight one. I think I'm not expecting a pretty game of football, really. I'm gonna be cautious and say 1-0 to Leicester with no real idea on a goal scorer because I don't know what team sheet is. But ultimately, I think a 1-0 away win would be a great bit of a great journey out there, and hopefully, we can rest some legs in the latter stages of that game if we're comfortable. But I'm not expecting it to be a walk in the park, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a tricky game, bit of travelling involved in there as well. I think you'd be happy with a scrappy 1-0 window. I personally think that we should again have too much for Athens. I think there'll be a bit of rotation. I'd like to see Under given a start and see what he can offer from the word go. I mean, he showed that he's definitely got the speed and also the quality to be an impact sub, but it'd be interesting to see what he was like given a full match. I'll go ahead and say I'll go 2-0 win to Leicester. I think that would be a result that we can all be happy with. No injuries, crucially, and then get ready for what is a big game against Leeds on the Monday night, which I think we will preview closer to the time. So I think this has been a fairly rapid summary of what was a very, very busy week. Is there anything that you'd like to add at this point, Chris? I do always ask you.
No, I'm just quickly flicking through the AEK Athens squad.
There's only one.
Yeah, I thought that was Nelson Oliveira who did spend some time at Forest.
Yes, and then a few years at Norwich, Reading, all the big UK clubs, obviously.
But no, in terms of any other business, I think it's been a concise one. It's been a good one. We do hope there's 3 of us next week. Subject to clocks not changing, but apparently they do change next week in America. So it's all a bit weird, and I don't think I'll get my head around it anytime soon.
No, we'll wrap it up with a further apology to Austin. Mate, we're very, very sorry. But thank you to everyone who has listened this far, and for everyone who continues to support the podcast. It is very much appreciated by us all. And hopefully, like Chris said, we'll have a full roster back next week, and we can try and review a couple more wins for Leicester. Wouldn't that be nice? See you next time.